I'll say this. So you were talking about angle grinders. No, what was it? What were you saying? The three things?
Binders, minders, and grinders. There's a
Okay.
good article on it too. You can search on the internet. But so finders are people out doing business development, actually finding relationships, finding partnerships, and you need someone that can do that, that can talk the talk and communicate. And then there's minders, who's actually going to put the data together, who's going to mix and match it, who can collaborate with this stuff to put it on paper or on a site or a full service. And then you have your grinders, who's going to actually do the work, because not everybody can do all three, and you're going to have blips of success with doing two of them or a hybrid. And then when he was telling me, is like, you actually need to look at the company you're going into or interviewing with, and it's like, screw the job title, screw all this. What do you need me to do? Am I a minder, a grinder, or a finder for you? And explain it to them so that they're like, oh man, like this title or this position isn't even what we want you to do, or what you're good at is not this position. And so that will kind of like pre-qualify yourself or kick yourself out that you didn't waste your first 90 days, because there's even all those personality tests that show how you will act in 90 days, because you'll say all this stuff in the beginning and then it does the deeper questions that show how you actually resolve to different things and what your long-term choices are, because you can say anything in the beginning and then how you're actually going to go through your demeanor is a big difference. So that finders, minders, and grinders was very useful, because I started telling that in interviews, and I'm like, what do you want? And here's what I'm good at. I can do pretty much all three because I'm so stubborn, and I've done all three in different organizations, but I'm better at these first two because I can see things from the beginning to the end, which is why people use me, because I can start the very first step and we'll finish to the last. Sometimes there's some people that take the last quarter out of it because I don't need to be on site for it, but I've implemented everything else with the right details, the who, what, where, when, why, how, to make it go successful and make them think about the questions for whatever it is. If it's a project, construction project, lighting, implementation of a software, a training, it's like, did you even think about this? Because they're like, let's just go on the 7th. And it's like, a good example for us is we have a high-level trainer coming up next month. The amount of work I've put into just prepping the week before is dumb. I emailed my assistant to say, she's not an assistant, she's an office manager, buy extra food and snacks. We're going to have 20 guys in this training room. We already have some stuff at the work. I want extra. I want food ordered for both days, already done, compared. We're not running around. I want extra of these books that we have to have at $170 a piece in case one gets destroyed or wet or whatever. I've given them updates in advance that, hey, this is a 2-day training class. It's costing us $20-some thousand. Book your stuff. Don't do any doctor appointments. If you have an emergency, that's fine. But tell your significant other, find a babysitter that you need to be at our office for these 2 days. Tell your job sites that you're going to work extra half days or something so that you can be in the office for these 2 training days. Don't go be at a bid meeting. Don't go to this. Don't go to that. Have your stuff done so that when we're paying this guy $20,000 to be there for 2 days, you're there. And it's a lot of stuff people don't even think about. They're like, oh yeah, we're having a meeting on the 17th. No, we're not. We're paying a bunch of money for a training. And oh yeah, we got to have stuff printed. We got to have ink. We got to have all this stuff. And when you look at it from beginning to end, you'll have such a more successful outcome than react. And you get your first interruption. Who's answering phones that day? Who's doing this? Is there enough power chargers inside for all these guys' laptops and phones? And it bewilders me because I've seen all the issues and I try to prevent it by being ahead of it. And you can use ChatGPT and you're like, just do very good prompts and a theme. I have a trainer coming in for 2 days. What do I need to tell my team? And tell them what your team is. Are you software developers? Are you contractors? Are you a cleaning company and someone's coming in to show you a new product? Like, what do we set up for them? What do we prep? How early do we get there? Like, just a bunch of dumb stuff that you may or may not think of. And it's not like it's low level stuff. It's like next tier, medium, and high that you're like, oh, I do need to be prepared for that. And so many people miss out, and then you have shitty results That's why like finals week, they're like, go to sleep early on finals week. Like, don't be out partying. Don't be doing this. Like, actually do what you need to be healthy for those 2 days.
So
And
you sound like a minder then. Is that how you would classify yourself?
I can both find opportunities because I'll talk to people, and I've gotten over insecurities from thousands of books and seminars and talking to people and being on film and being on radio interviews that took me a long time.
Mm-hmm.
So I like finding opportunities, but then I'm also like the SOP guy because I want it to be well written. I want it to go from beginning to end. Because some people you have to white glove handhold them, and it's its own thing, and you learn real quick. Some people just get it. Like that's why I like doing some customer service with a lighting app, because there's an IT guy I can talk to, and he's like, "Oh, I get the tabs, and it's lateral. It's moved from here to here." And they're like, "Cool. We just got done in 40 minutes what it takes me other people 3 hours."
Mm-hmm.
And so, but it's based on the minder side that you have this data, you can put it in order, make it simple, and then like it's a thing where you're also preventive. Like if I've taught the same thing to 13 different people, you should probably make an email about it or an SOP or a YouTube short or something to speed this up. And that's why like even when I was little, it was so funny. Like, do you remember calling the movie theater and you had to like listen to all the times for 20 minutes?
Yeah.
And you had to wait and you like hope you heard your movie, and then you're like write down times. And then they got to the point where they're like, press 1 for Starship Troopers, whatever, press 2, and then you could go to it. And so like from seeing that stuff and picking up little things that other companies did, or even like you don't even call, when you call a business, they don't pick up. They're like, we open at 8 a.m., we close at 5 p.m., Monday to Friday and Saturday. Like that answered the top 12 questions. And so it's like, why not have that stuff up front? Or when you're training a cashier, it's like, don't just put them on the register. Teach them how to do cash. Teach them how to do a credit card. Teach them how to do a check. Teach them a freaking coupon. Like you could get so far ahead of this stuff of saying, hey, what's the top 10 problems you run into that you need to be prepared for? And of course, it's different for like a doctor and a physician that you're going to run into 1,000 different things. But the majority of people, like a bike mechanic, you're like, hey, here's the top 10 problems that happen. Here's how you fix them. And then you'll get enough experience and knowledge from that, that when there is something different, you can probably troubleshoot it and trace it back because you knew the exhaust, you knew this, you knew how things work. And same way, I'm sure with computer hardware things, it's like, well, you check these in order because this is usually the most popular things.
Yeah. I think I'm a minder and a grinder more than a finder. And my hypothesis is because I know how everything works, it makes it difficult to imagine how something could work net new.
Okay.
Because in the back of my mind, I'm always restricting myself by how. And it seems like the people who are good finders do not have that mental restriction on their life. They're just like imagining how something could be.
They're the dreamers.
How it would work.
They are the dreamers, and they'll come up with 8 solutions for something, and you're like, you're mind blogged that like you found 2, and you're like, oh, these 2 are great, and they're just spitballing. You're like, have you been locked in prison? Like, how did you think of 8 ways for this one simple thing so fast? And it's almost like impressive. You're like, I was glad to have 1 solution, and you came up with 8 in record timing. So yeah, you're correct that the finders are usually the dreamer type, and they don't care how it works. It's like, oh, you could figure it out. Well, tell an engineer, like, this bridge is going to span to Hawaii. I don't care how. I just want the Hawaii bridge.
Yeah, and that term engineer, like that way of thinking, in the old days, like my parents even, like it meant physically working with machines or electronics. But in our generation, a lot of the engineering we've been doing has been with business processes and how software interacts with other software. So it's like those are the machines and the electronics. But it's still engineering because we're having to do like system level thinking.
That's why they call it like value engineering, sales engineering. It's caught on.
So we both know Luke, who founded a company that we both interacted with a lot. He was very much so a finder. And I actually think that that was his core strength. And when he went away from that core strength and tried to be something else, that's when he actually didn't do as well. So I think there's a lesson there in knowing who you are and doing it well.
Correct.
Which kind of brings us back to the beginning of our conversation before we started recording. I was talking about how I, as an operator, to use a kind of different nomenclature, um, is am having trouble thinking big and differently about my business or businesses because I'm stuck or have been stuck. I want to be careful with my language, be open to thinking differently in the future. I have been stuck in the past thinking of just what I can do and how it can be done, and less about what is possible if I were to allow myself to just think bigger. And I've started to realize, or I've started to have a desire to let other people in to help. And whatever mental block I've had about that, I'm willing to start the process of releasing it and asking for help, letting other people in. I'm guessing some of those are just, you know, limiting beliefs on whether like, I'm imagining people not wanting to work with me or not wanting to work for me or wanting to get paid more than I can pay them or just not. And that there again, it's all, I'm thinking about the how before the what.
Yep.
Because I could just say,
subjective, Eric.
yeah, I could just say, hey, I want, I found it even difficult to dream. So, like, I was just listening to something before this call where the person was saying, I imagine myself getting a check for $100,000 every week for the rest of my life. And I would never have even had that thought to imagine that. I like when I made my big goals for this year, I made a goal of, I think maybe like my stretch goal was to make $20,000 per month. But there's no reason why I couldn't make theoretically $20,000 per day or per hour. Like if I'm just imagining something from scratch, what does it matter? It could be $1 million a second.
You've got a lot of the subjective side of it though too, because you're going to figure out how. You're like, and then you're going to get hung up on making $20,000 a day or something.
So I wanted to talk to you about, like, what are your skill sets, and if we were to think synergistically between our different skill sets, is there any complementary features that would lead to something being greater than just us working individually?
That's why, like previously, do you ever remember when I told you about next level consulting?
Your consulting business?
Ours.
Oh,
because I still don't have it going, but because and it was strictly because you had like the IT background and then some of the other business consulting side. Because I get involved with these groups and I'm out with people, people see the success or what looks like success, or that you're outgoing and they're intrinsic and they don't know how to talk to people. And then if you're approachable or they get the time, or they can message you now with DMs and Instagram, Facebook, all that, like they'll find you if they want to talk to you, which is the same way with why when I'm doing this book stuff for LinkedIn, I was like, hey, I'm doing this LinkedIn book. I am doing free hour sessions for tutoring. Whatever you want, I'll go over my agenda. Whatever you want to work on, we'll do. And so I got a ton of people that messaged me, and then I got a ton of people that were like, hey, will you talk to my boss, Mr. Burton? He talked about this, but someone wanted $8,000 or something out of it. Will you do your hour with them? I was like, yeah, sure. And so people will reach out if they're interested. But why I said that for me is because I'm involved with these groups. I'm doing the webinars, I'm doing talks, I'm all that. When there's someone that wants something, they're willing to do it. Same way, like if you go to a trade show for house buying or house building and you're on the windows, you're going to go look for the window guys and you're going to talk to them and figure out pricing and timelines and all that good stuff.
Mhm.
So I am pulling in people and clients that are wanting to do the next thing. And then like, so I was like, I'm able to find them, but then some of the stuff like the websites and crap, I don't want to deal with. That's why like I pay a team in Ecuador to do all mine. Like I can do it and I can spend hours on it. Same way with my trade show banners. Like I can make a trade show banner. It's not that hard. And I'll spend hours on the symmetry of it and making it align. But if you are a marketing company, I want you to do it because you know what's trending right now. You know what colors are working. You know the audience that you want curvy letters for women and the softer and all that stuff. Industrial has its own rules. And then like what's popular right now? Because you only have the 8 seconds. Like you got to be able to read from 8 feet away. You got 8 seconds for them to know what you do. So my first proof on a trade show banner was our logo, our services, and our tagline. It was like 30 lines of text. It was too much. So people are like, what's the top 3 things you do? And then put your tagline and your logo or where you're at, or a QR code if they want to do a form fill. And so why I say that is if you want to find a marketing person, if you want to find an operations person, if you want to find an accountant, you can find a CFO that's going to do this stuff for you, or a tax person. So if you have your list of services, and then like I can bring people in, because I get people that want coaching and consulting, and I just tell them, especially the inventors, because I've already brought a product to market. They're like, will you help me with Kickstarter? Yeah, I'll help you with the Kickstarter because I can get on chat and I can figure out what the top steps are. And then I've looked at Kickstarter multiple times because every September, like I don't know why it works out that way, I always want to do a Kickstarter, and then it hasn't happened yet. And so I'm like, I've done enough background research that, yeah, we could do a Kickstarter for your program. I'm going to get you the top things that you need for it. I'll edit your videos that you have because you have enough like 8-second clips that you could have a really good thing at the end. And so it's also the fact that you have customers that are at square zero. They have nothing. They work a 9 to 5. They don't have computer skills. They barely have email skills. And then you have all the way to people that are like nearing retirement that have done 30 companies, but they're stuck on something. And they want that one individualized thing to get them over the top. Because that's what I'm always looking for. I was like, what gets me over the top? Like what sustains me? What's not just the blip, but what can keep me over the top? Like I'm just constantly chasing and trying to figure out with inventions or the different businesses or services or what's hip, what's popular. Because if it's popular, it's probably going to sell versus, hey, what was cool 20 years ago and you try to bring it back. That's such a rough, hard thing.
Yeah, it is better for product development to try to develop something that's already popular. But I'm wondering if, because this is a theme I've been thinking about lately, and in that it's similar to the arrival fallacy, and I'm starting to wonder, like I keep asking myself, why can't I ever figure things out? Kind of like you, I feel like I'm constantly standing at a safe, turning the wheel, trying to see if the door opens. And I'm starting to realize that the act of trying is the thing. The process,
The journey is the way, or what's that book?
The journey is the destination. Like there is like, it's almost like a perpetual chasing of the rainbow. You never actually get there. The only thing you ever have is the journey to the rainbow or whatever. And there is no ever figuring it out. And I'm wondering in your case if there's actually like joy or even intention in that, where if you were to like, if the catch the road runner, would you be sad? Like I
I
remember
do,
there.
and then I just move on to the next thing. Like that's why there's a really cool author in Indiana, CJ McMillan, that you might subscribe to his newsletter too. But he's written 2 books. One of them's Thrive, and then one of them's The Overachiever Success Guide. And he was one of those guys that worked for like a big global company, and then he just got more certifications, more degrees, more certifications. And he would never celebrate his wins. He wouldn't go out to dinner with his family. He wouldn't go do anything. And then when he was talking to other businesses and consulting, he found a lot of achievers did the same thing, that they'd buy another business, they'd sell another business, they'd buy a second location, and it wouldn't mean anything to them. And I was at the same point because I would like do something and I would have like, it was almost like the drug thing. Like it would get down to like microseconds of happiness. And then I'm like, okay. And I just move on to the next thing. And I'm like, it's so unhealthy because you will never be done. You'll never go on vacation or something because you got to this goal. Like, unless you plan it, you are just going to move on to the next thing. And then because we're in such a developing, growing world, there'll be something new you can chase. There'll be some new thing. Like, yeah, there's your basic stuff of speaking, being an author, being a podcaster, all that stuff. There'll be something new that comes out that no one even does yet. There'll be some type of 3D collaboration talking where now you're a 3D hologram talking to somebody else. Like, that's going to be the next thing probably. It'll be meeting in person. And even all the Quest people, like, they're going to the Super Bowl in the Quest, so like watching, and you can look around and stuff, like with the YouTube TV and all that. So even if you did everything you wanted, tomorrow some new thing is going to come out and you're like, oh, I guess I'm going to do that now. So all the way back to the beginning is, once you do something, celebrate it. If you got your MBA, if you got a certification, if you finished your book, you finished your software, like they tell you, go out to dinner with your family, take your folks out, like talk about it or post about it. And it's not to get the congratulations, but it's like, hey, this is done. I spent 8 months on it. I poured blood, sweat, tears, money, resources, sacrifices, and actually enjoy it, because otherwise you were just going to move on to the next thing. And it's going to be like, why did I do all that? Like, yeah, I know I can do it. And I'm sure you're at the point that, like, it's hard, but you're smart enough and you've done enough things that you're like, okay, I can do it. Big deal. Like, it's not fun anymore. It's not an accomplishment. It's just, here's the things, because you're the SOP guy, and you'll figure out the operations that, like, if I want something, the number one selling book, I'm going to look up all the things I have to do for it, the release date, this, the price point, all this, the keywords, the AdWords, the SEO. I'm going to pre-prep for it. I know how much money I have to spend on it. I have to know what day of the week I have to do it on, like video games and stuff. Like, it's only successful on certain days of the week.
But that word want, I think, is very key, because if I found that we always do what we want to do. And it has occurred to me that the reason why I have what I have is because this is all I wanted. I didn't actually want to run a big business and be responsible for it and have employees and all the liabilities and the risks. I just wanted to make just enough and have a little bit extra. So have my baseline paid for and then have a little bit extra to do other stuff. And that is what I have. So, but yet I still have this like yearning to produce, but it could just be that the yearning is just to keep me out of entropy, because I have to essentially want to do more, even to just maintain what I have. But I miss the like obsession about a thing. And that's why I started the 4-year U, because not specifically, but it was the result of a internal query where I was asking myself, what is something I can just pour myself into for like a year and get obsessed with and keep trying to mold and craft, that I can just have control over, in a non-stressful way, and just kind of slowly work on it every day. And at the end of the year, kind of look back at this body of something and have something substantial.
And what did you call that?
That's the 4-year U.
What's the basic of that?
The idea is that it is thinking in terms of 4-year arcs instead of just like smaller goals or even a year-long goal. The 5-year plan, that's people talk about, is a little bit too.
The one they made fun of in Big Daddy with Hooters.
Yeah, like your eyes just kind of glass over, where you're just like, oh man, a 5-year plan, that sounds so pedantic. And then there's that quote about like that's often attributed to Bill Gates, that people underestimate what they can do in a year and underestimate what they can do in 10 years. And so 10 years, you can get a lot done in 10 years. Sometimes 1 year is not enough. But the thing about 4 years is that people understand that block of time. It happens, the Olympics, presidential elections, high school, college.
That's why it's probably so comfortable.
Yeah. So, and then I started realizing that as a child, you get programs assigned to you. They say, you're doing this for the next 4 years, and you just do it. And then again in college, you're doing this for the next 4 years, and then you just do it. But when you're an adult, there's no more structure. So the idea of the 4-year U is you essentially start to think of every 4 years as in terms of, okay, what am I doing? What program do I want to create for myself for the next 4 years? And it's almost like an operating agreement with yourself. I'd like to act this way. I'd like to accomplish these things, and I want to do it in these time periods. And it gives you a structure to do it. Right now, it's a spreadsheet. I'd like to make it an app. I'd like to get like guidance counselor type coaches that could meet with you monthly or weekly to help you through it and help you accomplish goals. So it's like an application of a life coaching. There could be associated a book on how to do it. There could be planners, journals, calendars. So there's lots of stuff I can sell people. That is one of the reasons I'm doing it, but I'm also doing it for myself because I want to live this way. Because just to give a little bit of personal insight in how I came to this revolution, when I was born, 4 years later we moved. 4 years later we moved again. 4 years later we moved again. And I started, and then 4 years after that, my parents switched churches, and then 4 years after that, I went to college, and 4 years after that, I have a family, and 4 years after that, I had a business, and I started seeing my life naturally move in these 4-year arcs. And we went from the pandemic to 2024, and I realized that was the end of a 4-year arc, and I was like, holy crap, I'm just going to formalize what's already happening naturally. But I called it the 4-year U because the U is a double entendre. It means you, and it also means like university.
I take it. I think there's a lot to it. I think some of the stuff you could save yourself time and effort with the amount of guidance and life coaches stuff that's out there that you could just look and you're like, the steps, like what's the 100 things I need? Or do you want to focus on just the stuff that's like important to you or that related to you? That way it might speed you up a little bit. One thing you said earlier, go ahead.
I want it to be a platform where a life coach could get on there and like go through a small certification process, and they could be like, if you go to like Dave Ramsey's website, you can find like a financial advisor, and so a life coach could apply to be like a 4-year U coach. And then people coming to the site that wanted to find a local life coach or someone they like could pick that person, and then I would get a % of their sales. And then similarly, but different, if that life coach had a program that they wanted to run through the software.
That might be your key, is because there's a lot of people that are going to be similar to this that then have their own idea. And they're just going to be the psychology type side, the guidance counselor, that if you could ask them the questions, because you're good at like asking those hard questions. They're like, well, why are you doing this? And people are like, well, I just want this. You're like, no, why are you doing this? What does it do? And it's like, because like it hasn't like frustrated me or made me mad. It's like, fine, I won't do it then, because like you're asking such a tough question that I am going to run into in 3 months after thousands of dollars of investment that I didn't have answered in the beginning. But if you did all of this, I really think you would be surprised with some of your coaches of what they wanted, like an individualized app or a planner or a survey thing that you could take and then retake after you did something, or an achievement, or after you got over addiction. And I almost wonder if that would be your ticket of charging them, like, hey, your idea, it's great, we could do an app out of it, or I can help you with a podcast, or I can help you with a newsletter or an article, and then here's the platform we're putting it on, and then we're funneling people that need this help from church, from addiction. Like I could even introduce you to a chick in Canada that I worked with earlier on LinkedIn that does the addiction recovery. So it's like, hey, I saw that white paper you did, and we made that your featured LinkedIn article. And she's like, yeah, we did. That would be something that's like, what can you do to expand upon this article, or can we interview about it? Because that was something that
how would you turn it into a checklist that someone can do over time, like create a program out of it? So like Udemy has classes. So it'd be like Udemy, but instead of having videos that you watch and quizzes that you fill out, it would be basically things to accomplish per week over time, like a school. It's essentially like a course or a journey. Um, and so these are kind of also similar ideas. You remember my Seektivity app idea, where the idea was that you could go to a physical place and create an activity there, and it's
With the
mapped to that.
photos and find all the stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, and like a place in the world would essentially be an object in the database that like photos, videos, stories could be attached to that physical place, and you would have to like go to that place to add more stuff to it. Like you
Climb the
couldn't.
mountain, do all that stuff. So kind of like
Yeah.
an Instagram, but more active. Like if you climbed Kilimanjaro or whatever, and you're in this program for the 4-year you then could post that you were there or whatever, or like you could get that unique QR code or what
Yeah.
have you. So I mean, yeah, and you'll find a market just like the Spartan races and CrossFit. Like you'll have people that are hardcore about it, and then they need it. And so I think that's not, it's not crazy by any means, because there's so many other people that do pieces of it that are successful with it. Just like clothing companies, they're like, hey, if you're wearing my Black on Ammo t-shirt somewhere in Gatlinburg or whatever, like tag me. I'll send you another shirt or whatever. So there's
Mhm.
people that are willing to participate. That you'll have your shy people too, that they just want to go do it. It's like, hey, I'm part of this. And then like the more groups you do and all that good stuff, because people need the collaboration and like-mindedness. So none of
Yeah.
that sounds crazy. The one thing I was going to tell you earlier from your notes, because you were saying you were kind of having the struggle part of not the creativity stuff, but the big creativity side of it.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things we do with the Kentucky Inventors group is like one Tuesday a month, we have like, I don't know if they call it roundtables or like brainstorming sessions, but we have these breakout rooms on Zoom, and there'll maybe 20 or 40 of us. So they'll put 3 or 4 of us in a room, and then they do an AI generator. And like the other week we had sleep pod music health. And the 4 of us had 5 minutes to make an entire product, service, or company out of those 3 words. And you could interpret it how you wanted or anything. And so like, it was me, the girl that I did the LinkedIn training with, because that's why she's like, oh, I trust you on this because you did such good ideas. And then a couple other people. And so we took sleep pod, music, and health, and we're like, those float tanks for like buoyancy and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
We are going to do that, but we're going to turn it into a sleep pod, make it safe with sensors and everything. And then you are going to sleep on the pod. We are going to play the frequency that actually helps your brain sleep, because they've figured all that stuff out. Like that's what we're going to pump in. We're going to pump in oxygen. We're going to make all these measurements, and we're going to actually see how you do for insomnia or for stress or for this and that. And it's going to be like a service you try to go to once a month or whatever to get back on track. And so, and then we had ladder, safety, something else. So like you have to do this multiple times with teams, and like you may have a really good idea, and then you get stuck on stuff too, because you're like, well, I wanted to do this, and this guy's like, well, I wanted to do this, and the girl's like, well, I wanted to do that. And so then it's part of that team collaboration. But then you see their ideas. Like I had this super crazy Bluetooth ladder idea that you could put on any unlevel surface, and it had actuators with it. Unfortunately, it was heavy, but it would purposely like move the front right leg 5 millimeters to keep you balanced. And then if you started to sway or anything, it would alert through an app. It had weather modification, so that if like there was a cold front coming in or wind gust, it would be like, hey, you were limited on your ladder thing. And if it fell, it was still Bluetooth linked to your partner to be like, ladder 2 fell, go check it out. And so it was funny to like look at how minimal they wanted to do with just this safety ladder, and then like within a short amount of time what we added to it to have probably too many features. But it helped with that creativity, because you get stuck on one thing, and like you said, like whatever it is, and then you get other people's opinion, or they pick up something, they crack it in half, they put it in backwards, they look at it backwards, and you're like, did you look at that in a mirror? Did you eat it? What, like, how did you even come upon that?
Yeah.
And I wonder if maybe like joining some of those, what are those smart roundtables, the brainstorming sessions? What are those called? Like they used to have a cool name back in like the 90s, and it's in the Iron Man movie and stuff. Like the think tanks.
Is it mastermind? Oh,
That's like the new word for it. But like there's the think tanks and stuff. And I wonder if you went to some of the creative ones where like they give you, because they're using a lot of AI now where it's like it will just generate a couple random words or they kind of go together and it says, hey, make a whole company, service, or product out of this in 5 minutes together. And that might kind of like tip you over the top that you've got to start thinking big, or like force yourself that it's bigger. Like whatever you want it to do, like real basic, you're like, oh, I'm gonna have a water watering plant, a plant watering device. And then you're like, oh, well, make it bigger. Make you take a picture of the plant first, and that plant needs X milliliters per day based on size. And I planted in September of 2025. It's going to be this big in September of 2026. It needs this much more water. It's all just math and calculations. That's why people have figured out all this stuff with fish tanks and lights and the nanometers to make the clownfish in South Africa go to mating season early. And you type in 539 nanometers or whatever. And then all of a sudden, like they think it's mating season, and then they start having fish eggs. And so why I say that is maybe like force yourself in those scenarios only to think way bigger, because you're wanting the opposite and you're like, how do we do it? How do we lay this out? And maybe you are limiting yourself. That's the same reason they tell creative people never go get your MBA, because you will turn into an operations person. And there's several MBAs with marketing and operations and all that, but most of them are more operationally sounded programs and institutions. And if you want to go run a company, that's great. If you want to go run the military, do all this stuff, that's great for it. If you are a creative person, you might rob yourself, but then maybe you can make a company out of whatever service you wanted to do.
Yeah,
That's weird or crazy.
No, it's good. I mean, it's making me think. Even in the earlier in the call, I said I'm looking for wanting to be open to help, and you're suggesting like essentially instead of going to one person, like finding group opportunities to like solicit help from a lot of different people. There's another concept in just general that of focus, and a lot of advice that's given in regards to what we're talking about would be like if I could imagine like a Alex Hormozy or a Gary Vee talking to me right now, they'd say like, or even Charlie Munger, they'd say, what is the one thing that you could focus on that will lead to the most results that you want to do? Because I mentioned, for 4-year you, there's a lot of different things, like physical products, digital products, services, software. I primarily think of myself as think of 4-year you as a software company that's wanting to make a platform, but it's the thing that I'm working on, I would say the least, because I don't know how. And I've tried using AI and I've tried doing it myself, but now in talking with you in this context, it's starting to make me realize that if I'm really serious about this, why aren't I talking to people who actually know how to make software? Instead of just doing it all myself. Like, how serious am I about this?
That's why I like those mastermind groups too, because we do a thing where we have a different Tuesday night where we all sign NDAs. So like you have to be in the group and you have to pay for it. It's like $18 a month. And there's guys and girls from all over the world, South Africa, that have done nothing, like they're on a napkin. And then there's people that have 20 patents under their name and they're retired because they made so much money on their product or service, but they just like donating time, and they'll be part of the coaching. And you're like, here's what I have, here's my next steps, here's what I'm struggling with. And then people will raise their hands because it's like a Zoom call, and then there's mediators and stuff that run the company, and they're like, have you thought of this, or have you done this, or can I introduce you to this guy in Texas that is all he does? And you're like, that's a thing? And you're like, That's all he does. And you're like, holy cow. So that might be something you could look into, is because it's also like, it's so tough because we're stuck in our own little world and we're looking at it from one lens. And that's why people help people better otherwise, because you're 30,000 feet away and you're like, I don't know how much money you spend a month on it, and I don't know how much time, but if it was me, this is this one little point I would do differently, or this is what I would change, or the color, or the whatever. And it's almost better when someone's outside because they don't know the internal problems or struggles or what's going good and what's not. But the exterior view of it is, here's one thing you could do differently, or one thing you could do to add to it to get you over the top. And I wonder if the mastermind groups or any of that stuff would help you, because it's like, because if it was me, I'm still on your operational side, that I would actually build all the little pieces. So why I'm telling you this is on my LinkedIn book. I'll just ask you multiple choice questions of yes or no. So do you think I found a copywriter first or later in the session?
Later.
Later. Do you think I found the people I wanted to interview for the book first or later?
First.
First, because now I have different people I'm going to relate with that all have their own skill sets. So one girl is already like LinkedIn famous, and she's on the bad end of it now, that other competitors are poaching her people. So like she goes out to dinner with them, or she does this. Well, now her competitors calling like, oh, I saw that you were with this person. If they don't come through for you or they're too busy, call me. And so now she's on like the bad side of it, that it's like, shit, I got to this level of notoriety that, not that I'm being attacked, but my people are being poached. Which is the same thing why non-disclosure agreements and why your partnerships and all that stuff, you don't always post them. And manufacturers do the same thing. Like if they know your end user, a lot of them will go around you and try to sell direct, no matter if it's paint, lighting, service work, anything. And that's just part of some people's and culture's business. And then I also found a body language expert. So I am interviewing him about body language, of studying LinkedIn profiles, but looking at your eyebrows, looking at your lips, looking at your ears, so that I can tell kinesthetically how I should approach you. Should I call you? Should I video message you? Should I text you? All this different stuff just based on your facial features, which is crazy. And then like rounded eyebrows versus this, like, do I ask you personal questions or do I not? Because I know I'm going to get shot down really early. And I'm adding all that to the book to make it a better LinkedIn guide, because while you're searching these people, and even people's faces change. Like if your photo is still from 20 years ago, I guarantee your facial features have changed, and maybe you're a hardened freaking CFO now that no one likes to talk to. And you have your bright, bubbly picture from your wedding. People are going to probably approach you that way. And same with like women changing their hair and all that good stuff. But why I say that is, to you, I like putting pieces together. I don't like being at scratch. It's like a grocery list or anything else. Like if I have enough of the pieces, I can keep going and keep moving things forward, and I'll fill in the blanks. For you, like you may get introduced to this recovery guidance counselor, and then like have a conversation like, hey, I'm looking at this platform. Would you want to put your white paper on it? Or is there anything you want to expand upon? Or is there any certifications you would recommend for a person to have to be on for your you? Or like, what could I buy into? And then it just gives you something to research. You may not buy this, but like kind of like the leadership guy, Jim Rome and all that. Like you may not make that your portion, but you're like, hey, there's similar stuff to it, and here's my checklist boxes. And then you're interviewing a software person, and then you're interviewing people that may help you sell it. Like who's going to be at these recovery agent meetings? Who's going to be at a speaking conference? Who could talk about this? Who could set up a booth maybe for your you to say, hey, here's what we're doing. Here's a men's group. Who's going to do the Facebook?
I need to talk to coaches and find out what would make their life better. I know a couple, and I'm making some assumptions, but talking to them directly about like, hey, if I were to make software like this, would you use it? Would it be helpful? What features would you want? Because I've noticed that they're all just kind of working off of spreadsheets and Word docs, and there's no like software for them. But if they could have like something where that they could create a plan for their people, and then have their people do the plan, and they could check the progress of the plan. And then when they meet with them, they could review it together. That seems like the type of thing, but I need to ask them if they want that.
That's worth doing, because it's like anybody with goal sheets and the plans, because the owner of my company does the same thing, where he has like these journals and all this other stuff, and it's like, what are you working on? What value will it bring? Why are you doing it? What should you be working on it? What's fun? Because he also gives you like fun stuff to work on, because if you're just doing one thing, you're gonna get burnt out. But if
you're making me okay, so that would be another potential audience, is like managers at workplaces, to create essentially like plans, goal plans for their employees, because it's not just 4 years. It could be, you can make the length whatever you want. You can make a 1 year, a 1 month goal, a 1 year goal, 6 month goal.
you still have merit and value in your 4-year thing too, because people can move up. Like, you want to move up the corporate ladder, and we have the problem with all these new millennials. They're like, I've been here 6 months, I want to run the place and get $200,000. It's like, no, that's not how this works.
You could say, well, I did work at a place that used to, I forget the name of it, but they would create these like plans with you, but they would only do it if you were like on track to be an executive.
And they have that at Walmart and stuff. Like, they have the manager programs and Dick's and stuff. And it's like, can you get your hands on some of that, or even the old ones that have been out for 10 years? And just look at that track, and it's like, what are they doing for training? What are they doing with overtime? Or some of the people you have to shift around, and you have to be a shift manager, and then you have to be payroll, and then you have to do insurance, and then you have to do safety, and then you have to do stocking, so that you understand it as a whole when you have an issue. And then like shipping and logistics, like, why did the trucks show up, or the weather reports with the ice and stuff, or we had a death or a heart attack. And so that's why they've got all this stuff to be preventative. But you could probably look at that same thing, just looking at the linear track. Like, it doesn't matter what the details and variables are, because you're going to put in yours. You can use it as inspiration of like, I need all this stuff, or a lot of this is all fluff and cut out. Like, if you're not smart enough to figure out this stuff, then you probably don't belong here. But if this is what it took to be a high-level regional vice president of something, that's probably what I want in my 4-year plan. And then that way you have multiple audiences too. Like, you don't just have the guidance counselors, you've got the business people. You've got teachers. You can have your own little subsets of every baby thing you thought of.
Yeah, I was thinking like nutrition coach.
You have to remember.
Yeah, nutrition coaches, fitness coaches, they make plans for people all the time, and they can say like, this is your eating plan for this week, this is your workout plan for this week. Yeah, and move towards weightlifting goals, weight loss goals. Yeah. Yeah.
And there's enough of those people that they'll donate their time because they're excited about it, and that's their passion, and you'll see the light in their eyes and the glimmer. And so it's like, what do you wish you would have had? Or what, like when you started this 15 years ago, what do you wish that was out that's now out now? It's like, what are you using? And then you'll kind of see the trend stuff too, of like, it needs to do this, this, and this, and this. It doesn't matter what subject or what it covers. But if this would have been out 15 years ago, kind of like calendar invites, like that's why your dentist used to call you, like, are you still coming tomorrow? Now you get a damn email, you get a text and a call, voicemail. Come tomorrow at 8 a.m. or else.
Yeah.
So it's like, what's needed to have the highest level of success with the counselors, with the goals, with what do you do to set up for success?
Yeah. Well, cool. I appreciate you talking things through with me, Brandon. It's been good catching up.
Send me a good screenshot of us both smiling through your recording.
All right. Sounds good. Talk to you later, man. Yeah.